All right, guys, we're back inside for another build breakdown. Last time we covered my slashes, and the shelf is looking a little different now. We got a new guy there, but we will not be talking about that truck today. Today, as promised, we will be covering the crawlers. So let me get them down on the table and we'll start going over them. Okay, so you are looking at my two machines here. This is a Traxxas TRX4m Land Rover Defender and the FMS FCX18 Land Cruiser. Now the first one I picked up was the Defender, so let's start with him. And if you saw Alex's video, he talked about how long he's had his Bronco for. Now, I never really got to check his out. For the time period that he had it, we were pretty focused on the slashes and nobody seemed too interested in crawlers. I even kind of said that I would not want a crawler. They just seemed like boring to me. But my roommate Missile ended up picking up a TRX4m Bronco kind of on a whim. And as soon as I saw his crawling over some books and DVD cases in our basement, I was sold. I went out the next day to the local hobby shop to pick this thing up, and I've just been in love with them since. I think, watching these little things crawl over obstacles with the tires rippling and deforming, the suspension articulating, the kind of slow, methodical approach you need to take over navigating that terrain is just so much fun. It's a lot of fun just filming them up close because of how realistic and scale they look, even in this tiny size. I don't really have much interest in getting a 10th scale, but I said that about the 1/18th. But I just think these are so fun because you can pretty much crawl anywhere, and they still look really good for the size. So when I picked this one up, I wasn't really too sold on the way the Defender looked. I thought the Bronco looked cooler, but I knew Zach already had one and Missile had just gotten one. So I went ahead and got the Defender, and I have to say that the look of this has really grown on me a lot. When I got it, I did not really intend on modifying it too much. With my slashes, I talked about how I wanted to stick to all Traxxas parts on them. And honestly, the Traxxas offerings for the crawlers are pretty lackluster. They're very expensive and kind of ugly, in my opinion. But when I found out about the Endura parts, I quickly found some things that I was interested in. And that's pretty much what this build became, is just all Endura parts. And my goal with it was just to be very intentional with how I upgraded it. Zach talked about the kind of pitfalls of adding weight, and despite my best efforts, I certainly fell into that. So let's get into what modifications I've made. Now, the very first thing was the Traxxas light kit. I think Zach mentioned that, but if you have one of these TRX4Ms, get the light kit. It's $25. You get high beams, low beams, hazard lights, brake lights, reverse lights. It totally transforms the way the car looks. Just looks so much more realistic. It's fun changing between the lighting modes. You can crawl in low light with it. I couldn't recommend it more. It's just very cheap and easy. Really no reason not to get it. I think that should be your first upgrade. But then after I started, using this thing for a while, I pretty quickly found out that it had some shortcomings in performance. The Bronco bone stock crawls really well out of the box. Can't say the same for the Defender. It's clearly more top heavy. It's definitely more back heavy. And I found that on the same obstacles that I was approaching versus the Broncos, I was continuously tipping backwards, just having a hard time keeping the front wheels on the ground and rolling on the side too. So my first proper modification were the brass wheels. And if you weren't aware, the Traxxas tires apparently don't work well on aftermarket wheels, so I also got upgraded tires with that. So these are Endura brass, I guess you could call them beadlock wheels. They're the gray color, meant to just kind of look like old school steel wheels. The tires that I put on this are 58 by 24 millimeters. They are the all-terrain AT tires from Endura. These are just a tiny bit wider than stock and a tiny bit taller than stock. I did not need to trim the fender wells or anything on the body. It rubs like a little bit, but not enough for me to want to like start chopping it up. If you went any bigger than 58 millimeter, you definitely need to do that. So putting these brass wheels on, that helped me get the weight down low, but then I still wanted to shift the weight forward too. So I added the Endura brass steering link and the brass like servo mount, I guess it would be called. So I did this in gray, the steering link, and a black servo mount. And that, helped kind of get that weight forward. And at that point, I felt like it was driving pretty well. I definitely noticed like an immediate performance improvement with it, but it came with a large drawback. Now that this thing was so darn heavy, I lost my ability to crawl at slow speeds. It almost felt like you needed to kind of punch the throttle just to get the thing going. So that kind of forced me into doing the crawler gears. So I went ahead and just got the standard Traxxas plastic crawler gears. They're super cheap. I think it was like $4 or $5. And that, corrected that problem with the low speed. So I gained back my low speed potential. I just had to sacrifice that top end. But I was okay with doing that because to me, this vehicle I wanted it to be like a support vehicle. It's already got the scale accessories like the high lift jack, the gas cans, the roof rack. And then I went ahead and added a tow recovery strap, a fire extinguisher. Those are Endura parts as well. So I wanted this thing just to kind of be the slow, torquey, grunty mule that can just crawl over, anything to go and rescue somebody who's, tipped over or just in need of help. So the crawler gears got me there. And I was happy with that for a while, but then I did not want to lift it or add bigger tires, because then again, it's like now I'm bringing the weight higher, and I wanted to, just kind of keep that low stance, that aggressive stance, but gain some clearance, because I felt like that was the next thing that it was really lacking. I was just getting high centered a lot, having trouble with approach and departure angles. So my thought was to get the brass high clearance links from Endura. I think they look really cool. That pop of that kind of brassy gold color, and the undercarriage looks awesome. And then, you gain some of that breakover angle with those links being more parallel to the ground in the center of the chassis. I can't say I noticed a whole lot of drivability improvement from it, but, it couldn't have made anything worse. Well, it did make things worse, because guess what? Now I've added more weight to the rear because you have these longer links in the rear than the front, so I screwed up my weight bias. And I wasn't willing to go backwards. I wasn't going to take them off. So that means I needed to add more weight to the front to balance it back out. So my solution to that was getting the Endura brass knuckles. So it's the steering hub, if you will, not the caster block that mounts to the axle, but the actual hub behind the wheel. So I added those in brass. And that corrected the weight distribution, brought it back forward again, crawls really well. but it's crazy heavy now. And sure enough, I still have all of the plastic driveline components. I've got the plastic transmission gears, plastic diffs, plastic drive shafts, and wouldn't you know, I'm starting to strip out my front diff. Under load, it's skipping and clicking. It's been making noise for a while. Just kind of waiting for it to fail all the way, and then I'll probably fix that. But at the least, I'm happy with the performance right now. I feel like it's still, like it. I mean, this thing is a champ. If you've seen it in our crawler videos, it's a beast. It can get over obstacles that other people can't, and just watching this thing just chug along like a little tank is a ton of fun. I think I probably enjoy driving it more than the FMS. But the FMS has its benefits too. In terms of like parts failure and issues I've had, the stock servo, before I had even really added, it might have been stock at the time, but the first time we went to that Hobbytown crawler course, which you've seen on video, I blew up the stock servo. It lasted a lot longer than Zach's, but I did end up breaking it before the end of the day. So I put in the Traxxas Metal Gear servo. That's held up fine. I haven't had any issues with it since. I'm hoping I don't need to upgrade that. Like I said, I'm starting to strip out the front diff. The stock shocks on these, aside from the stock servo being pretty worthless, I think the stock shocks are the second biggest weakness of the TRX4m. They just leak. They leak like crazy. Mine were leaking almost immediately, and now, a couple months down the road, I have a feeling these are probably completely empty. I really don't feel any damping from them. There's certainly enough shock oil pooling in the bottom of them. I haven't actually opened them up to see if they're totally empty, and you really don't need proper dampers on these rigs. I'm okay with how they are now. If I replace them, I would probably get the Endura. I think it's the 53 millimeter shocks. It's more like the stock replacement ones. It's not the longer ones that Zach has. So maybe I'll get those at some point. But honestly, right now, I'm pretty happy with how this thing is sitting. Like I said, it's a ton of fun to drive. I feel like it's, in general, more capable than the FMS. I love how it looks. Probably just replace that diff whenever that thing finally kicks the bucket, but for the time being, I'm quite happy to drive it. I don't know if you noticed, I guess it's kind of sitting off camera. I did buy this from Traxxas, kind of a silly purchase, but with how heavy this thing is, I was flat spotting my tires like fast. If you let this thing sit, even for a day or two, the next time you drove it, they have a massive flat spot on tires. So I got this just as a way to keep the tires off the ground. And I mean, no complaints. It's no flat spots. If you had taller tires, they might still touch the ground because they're like pretty close. Yeah, you can kind of see in the light there. So there's a good amount of space, but they're still pretty close. So just be aware if you're running some massive tires on it. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything for the Defender. Yeah, like I said, I really enjoy this truck. So let's get into the FMS and kind of talk about the differences and pros and cons. Okay, so the FMS. I love to hate this thing. And when I bought it, I was expecting it to just blow the TRX4m out of the water. It had released like just prior to me purchasing it, so there are tons of videos on YouTube. Everyone's like, oh, get ready to throw away your TRX4m, the FCX18 is king, best mini crawler on the market. And on paper, man, it sounds really good. It's got a 2-speed transmission, portal axles, it's got bearings instead of bushings like the TRX4m. It's got a much nicer remote. It's got the full light kit out of the box. You don't need to upgrade to that. Probably some other things I'm forgetting, but The performance out of the box, dude. Oh my gosh, the stock tires are just pathetic on this thing. The stock Bronco TRX4m is an incredible crawler right out of the box. The Defender is pretty darn good, but clearly a little worse than the Bronco. This thing was like, I didn't even want to drive it. I was hoping to not have to throw a ton of parts on it because it's supposed to be like, you know, kind of upgraded out of the box. But right away, it became clear that I needed to order wheels and tires. So that was the first thing I did. These are Endura brass wheels, kind of lower offset than what I have on the Defender. And I went with much bigger tires because of the portal axles on this thing and just the way the suspension's set up. It's a tall truck. So I went ahead and stuck the big tires on it just to make it a little different. And I feel like it looks better because the stock wheels and tires are just tiny. They're like little skinny, tiny things. That's what the spare is. So you can kind of get an idea of just how tiny and skinny that is compared to what I have on it now. So when I added these wheels and tires, it was an improvement. It definitely felt better. I did need to trim the fenders to get it to clear. I tried to kind of carry the body line. Hopefully that's picking it up. The front arch looked the same as the rear arch. So it came down pretty steeply. It had more of like an actual corner to it. I just blended that line more smoothly into the rocker panel. And then I had to notch out the back of the front bumper. I didn't actually cut what you can see. It was kind of deeper in there, like up in here. The front tires still rub a little bit, but it doesn't really seem to impede the performance. And I like to keep trimming to a minimum. So I think I'm gonna leave it how it is. But I guess you don't have to worry about trimming until you get the servo saver delete. That was another huge problem with this thing out of the box. Why does a crawler need a servo saver? I get that this is supposed to be a little bit more of a trail truck than a hardcore crawler, but Traxxas had it right with the TRX4m. Just give me a servo horn. This servo saver, it worked with the stock wheels okay. It could not turn these. This thing already has a pretty crappy turning radius out of the box. And with the servo saver, you're getting like half of the potential turning radius. I did do the thing where I flipped the hardware for the knuckles. Let's see. Probably can't see it too well, but there's a screw that holds the C-hub, the caster block onto the axle. Out of the box, that screw head is in between the steering link and the axle, and you'll end up hitting that screw head and limiting some of your steering. So you just remove that screw and stick it in from the back. It buys you a little bit more clearance, but still, you know, you're not getting a lot. Let me see if I can give you a quick little visual comparison. Yeah, I guess it doesn't look too different on camera, but I can assure you when you're driving these things, you notice, especially with how tight these courses are, you want as much steering as possible. And the TRX4m just feels good. You're never really wishing you had more. With this, it's like you're just doing so many multi-point turns to get around stuff, and it's a pain. The part that I use to get rid of the servo saver, it's actually an FMS part. It's a brass servo horn. I think the FMS brass stuff is actually pretty nice, unlike the Traxxas stuff. So yeah, I threw that on there at the same time, or maybe like right after I did the wheels. And, you know, at that point, I felt like it was kind of where it needed to be. The brass wheels definitely help. This thing is very tippy. The portals make it sit taller. The tall tires I put on make it sit taller. And then, you know, I had to add the scale stuff on the roof. So these are all Endura parts. It's like the kind of Pelican case type boxes, the gas can, a big drum, sand ladders, and the cargo net is all from Endura. Looks like I just knocked it off. It all fits up there really nice. The scale is definitely perfect. And yeah, I love how these accessories look. You just sacrifice a bit of performance. And then, past that, I was driving it a lot like this for a while. I don't really feel like it offers much over the TRX4m in terms of performance. The wider stance, it only helps to balance out the fact that it's more top heavy. So it's not like it really benefits from it. It just kind of equalizes it. This thing has really good approach and departure angles, but it doesn't really seem to come into play as much as I would think. Because I'll zip right up an obstacle in this, and oh yeah, now that ride height's really helping me. But then with the TRX4m, you just take it at a bit of an angle and steer into it, and you get up it fine too. So it doesn't help a whole lot. I did have something break on it. The pinion for the diffs. It's like a plastic. The gear is plastic, and it's screwed into a metal stub that the drive shaft connects to, and that pinion gear stripped off the stub. It's pretty common on these. I think it happened on my front axle, only on one, I forget which, but I replaced it with an Amazon part, just a kind of crappy pot metal spool and pinion. It's been working fine so far. Haven't broken the other one yet, so we'll see if I have to replace that. Oh yeah, I did actually end up doing one more upgrade. It was still clearly pretty back heavy, not as immediately apparent as the Defender, surprisingly. This has more weight up front. The battery pack sits under the hood here. Look at that. But it is still back heavy. So kind of the most recent upgrade I've done are the brass portals for the front. These are also from FMS. I think they look really good. They look better than the Endura ones. I wish I could recommend them, but for a factory part, they fit very poorly. If you tighten the screws down all the way, there's 4 screws around the perimeter that hold the two halves together. If you tighten those all the way, you'll bind up the portal gears and it won't be able to roll. So I literally just had to leave them loose so there's a gap in between the two halves, and that prevents the friction. I double, triple checked to make sure that the bearings were seated all the way and there wasn't some other problem going on, but that's just the way it is on this thing. You would think for an OEM part, they would be better tolerance. Maybe I got the one bad set, I don't know, but it's a little concerning. Other than that, it's been pretty good. I cracked the kind of bumper here. That's not really a big deal. I broke the mirrors on the Defender too. I've glued them back on a couple times. I just keep breaking them off. You're bound to break the extremities on these because they're pretty heavy, especially if you're falling all the way off a table onto the ground. You're gonna break something. Yeah, I can't really point to a whole lot in particular on why I don't like this, but it's just, I don't know. Alex, you'll see with Alex's video, he's had so many problems with his, and even though I've only had a couple problems with mine, it just it kind of soured me to the whole thing. I would say in terms of pure crawling performance, what really aggravates me and hurts its performance, it's 2 things. It's the steering radius and the gear mesh. Because of the portals, it has more gears in the driveline, and it has so much driveline slop. So with it rolling here, I'm rolling it from basically tooth to tooth in the driveline. So that's quite a bit of movement. So what will end up happening is when you're crawling up an obstacle, you're loading all the gears in one direction. As soon as you let off the throttle to think about your next move or readjust, it will roll back that same amount that you're seeing here. So if you're perched right up on an obstacle and lift off the throttle, it clunks back. And it's got nothing to do with the trail brake or anything like that. I've got that turned all the way up. It's just the drive line. So no matter how tight you get the motor, you would need to ride the throttle essentially to keep it loaded so that it doesn't tip back, and that's messed me up so many times. I'll be like in a very precarious position and roll back and lose my line, or maybe even roll off. So it's very aggravating to drive it. With the TRX4m, it's got a little bit of slop, don't get me wrong, but significantly tighter. It's never something that I notice with this truck. You don't even have to think about it. But as soon as you start driving the FMS, you're immediately just like, whoa, what's going on? It's almost like something's like broken, or that you think you have the drag brakes set wrong, but it just doesn't matter. I don't know. When I run on a course with these two side by side, I very rarely feel like the FMS is better equipped. And I don't know what I could really do short of adding like a ton more weight, maybe narrowing the track width and dropping it down. It's just, I don't know. Not a huge fan of it. It's just kind of disappointed overall. The 2-speed transmission's cool, don't get me wrong. Like, if you're on a trail or something, it's nice to have that. It did kind of a comparison. The low-speed gear in the FMS is pretty much the same speed as the crawler gears in the TRX4m. The high speed is faster than the stock TRX4m gearing. So you get a really good range with this transmission. If your transmission stays in one piece. I'm sure Alex will talk about his transmission woes. I haven't had a problem with mine yet, knock on wood. But yeah, it's like the only like major reason to get the FMS is if you wanted that 2-speed transmission. But I bet somebody's made one for the TRX4m by now. I did want to talk about the remotes though, because to give credit where credit is due, the FMS remote is very nice. I love how tiny it is. The TRX4m comes with the TQ remote, so you can't even set steering endpoints on it, which you will want to be able to do, so that sucks. And it's so big. Like, it's just weird to me. I don't know. Probably nitpicky, but I like the scale of this FMS remote. It just feels appropriate for the vehicle. You get some great adjustments on it. Probably the most useful ones are the drag brake settings. So you can freely switch between, it's like 25, 50, 75, and 100% drag brake. Not that I change it a whole lot, but it's nice to be able just to flick those switches. You can control the lights from the remote with this button. That's very nice. On the TRX4m, you have to like take the body off and push a button on the ESC. This is cool, just be able to hit that button. You can shift the transmission with the channel 3 switch on it. That's nice. It runs on AAAs instead of AAs, and I feel like I do get kind of poor battery life out of this. But I love how it feels. You can do one-handed steering really easily. It's just nice, small, and portable. So FMS gets the win in the remote. I will give them that. In terms of the actual truck, I don't know. Parts are hard to get. Take forever. Maybe parts availability is better now, but it's never going to be as good as Traxxas. So that's something to consider as well. I mean, there we go. Another probably 30-minute yapping sesh about the crawlers. I think I covered everything I wanted to. I mean, like I said, like, I think these are a ton of fun. If you don't have an 18th scale crawler yet, I would definitely get one. Get a TRX4m, not the FMS. But grab one, and I think you'll be amazed at just how fun they are. It's also great to be able to give them to someone who's new to RCs. It's much less intimidating than driving something like a Slash or anything bigger than that. I've had one of my friends come over. I let them drive both of these on our little basement crawler course. Everybody has a blast. They're really fun rigs, and you really don't need to modify them either. Out of the box, TRX4Ms are great. If you start throwing parts at it, you're going to kind of end up going down that rabbit hole that I did, where you're just adding tons and tons of weight and trying to kind of correct the cons of previous mods. So something to be aware of if you do start to modify it. If you're careful about it and do it in small stages, like I tried to do, you'll end up with a really, really capable crawler that's definitely better than stock. You just have to be aware of the fact that it will be kind of a cascading series of upgrades that are going to get more expensive and cause more parts to break. So just be aware of that before you start modifying them. But yeah, like I said, tons of fun. And I'm stoked on these. I don't think I'm really going to modify them much more than they are now. I've just been enjoying driving at this point. And we haven't been driving them quite as much as some of the other vehicles, but we're planning on doing like a kind of adventure where we go out in the woods and do kind of like a cross-country trek in them. So I'm really looking forward to that. I definitely need to go to some more crawler courses in our area and check those out. But yeah, it's a great change of pace from, the larger, faster off-road rigs. So if you're on the fence about it, I would say get one. Yeah, I think that covers the build. I've probably said that multiple times now. Next time, we will be looking at my larger scale rigs. So I'm thinking of going over the UDR and the LMT in the same video. And maybe the Outcast, we'll see. But definitely the UDR and the LMT next time. I'm really looking forward to getting into the LMT. I know there's some questions about rear steer and things like that, so I'll be covering that as much as possible in that video. But all right, until next time, see you guys.